Good evening. Welcome to UPARS Los Angeles. My name is Steve Murillo. I'm the director for UPARS LA. It is December of 2019, about to go Perfect Vision 2020. Tonight, it's me. You guys have me tonight. This is the first for me, actually, to give a presentation here. I've given presentations at Contact in the Desert, other places, but it's a first tonight here at UPARS LA. So I'm proud to be here. I'm proud of you guys for being here. I'm glad for you guys to be here. But tonight we're going to talk about the Navy's stance on UFOs, latest revelations, and of course it started in 2017, December of 2017. And I remember it distinctly because my wife and I were on vacation in Jamaica when all of this went down, and there was a big release of news and everything, and I was out of position. I couldn't do anything. So anyway, let's move on. Let's introduce, for those of you who do not know me, my name is Steve Murillo, of course. Bachelor of Science, Systems Engineering from the United States Naval Academy, graduated in 82, go Navy, we beat them this last weekend, beat Army. I was an A4 pilot in the Marine Corps from 83 to 89. After that I got out and I used my engineering degree to become a satellite engineer. I worked on something called TDRS, which is Tracking Data Relay Satellite System, from 89 to 91. It was kind of a boring job. I was the electrical power subsystem engineer. My job was to integrate solar array battery, power control unit, bus, all this stuff. You know, the job had already been done for me, more or less. I found a few faults, and I was patted on the back. Other than that, it was kind of engineering work, which is great, but it wasn't exactly didn't suit my personality. So I became a mortgage broker and realtor, and I own a little mortgage and real estate company in downtown Manhattan Beach, and I've been there since then. And so then, military career, engineering, real estate, very pragmatic. I didn't really have any knowledge of UFOs or interest in UFOs until I had an experience in 2001. And from that experience, I became the state section director for MUFON LA, which we used to be MUFON LA. But now we've migrated and become UPARS because we realize that there's more to this whole phenomenon than just UFOs. And we can talk about that. How did I get into this field? What caused me to go from being pragmatic engineer to a guy that's talking about UFOs, right? How did I get into this field? It was a May 2001. I was on the rooftop deck of my house looking at the ocean, sitting in my hot tub. My wife had handed me a glass of wine. She's here tonight. She handed me a glass of wine. She goes, "Oh, I forgot mine." And she went downstairs. And I'm sitting in the hot tub looking at the ocean, and a flock of seagulls came over my head. And they looked sort of like that, like a three-pronged ninja throwing star. But they were all in formation. They were flying like that. And they flew directly over my head. So as I saw these things approaching, I thought that they were seagulls. Literally, I thought, here come some seagulls. And then the next thought was, why is somebody shining a spotlight on seagulls? I literally thought that somebody had to have a really powerful spotlight and shining on these things that they're flying away. And I was thinking, why would somebody do that? Who cares about seagulls? And then they're flying over my head, and this is what they looked like. The color is off here, of course. They looked, it was a very coherent light. It was a slight amber tint to a white light. They were not casting light. So, and over my years of research, I've encountered this many times where the witness, the light is sort of like an object. I don't know how to explain it any more than that. But like this light puts out a number. When you look at this light in the room, if you look at it, especially with glasses, you'll see an umbra. You'll see this projection, right? When I looked at these, and other people have looked at other objects or light, it's as if the light itself is contained therein, and it doesn't go outside of that. Do you follow? It doesn't cast light, and I don't know what that means. I don't know what to make of that. It's almost as if you're looking at a coherent laser beam that's not a laser beam. Okay, so these things are flying silently over my head from the west. They're flying dead east, right over my head. They must have been at about maybe 1,000 feet. To my eye, they were about the size of a car. And I followed them. My jaw was undoubtedly agape. I followed them over my head, silent. And as they flew over my head, they split off and take the lead and two others, split off across the sky and slid across the sky. In the matter of less than a second, they looked like they had about 1.5 miles, 2 miles separation, and the other two continued. And then 2 or 3 seconds later, the two that had been left behind slid across the sky again and joined up. with dead precision, and of course silent again. And based on my background in aerospace and everything else and engineering, I knew that I'd just witnessed something that wasn't possible. I knew that I'd seen something that wasn't physically possible for our aircraft. So I jumped out of the hot tub, screaming at my wife. I ran downstairs, dripping wet. I jumped on the computer to start doing research. I wanted to file a report. I called LAX Approach. I called Tower because Manhattan Beach is right next to LAX. I figured they would have had these things on radar, and they didn't have anything. And so I searched on Netscape about UFOs in Southern California and came across a website where I could file a report. And I thought to myself, thank God, finally, I can file a report here. So I did. I punched in a little report, and that was it. I thought that was going to be it. And then I got a call from Bill Casey a couple days later. Oh, these things are flying overhead. We'll go into the purpose of the talk in a second. I got a call from Bill Casey, who was the the lead field investigator for MUFON LA at the time. Now it's Alex. Alex's counterpart at that time was Bill Casey. He called me, interviewed me for about 15 minutes or so, and then wrapped it up. And he said, "Well, sounds to me like you had a pretty good sighting there." And he goes, "You want to come to one of our meetings?" And of course, my mind had been pried open, and I said, "Yeah, I'll be there. When is it?" So I jumped in with both feet and started reading everything I could on UFOs and what they were, and went to the meetings. And before you know it, they invited me to be on the board, and then one thing led to another, and I became the head of the organization. And we did that for 13 years as MUFON Los Angeles. And we followed many, many different cases in LA, in the greater LA area, and some were quite interesting. And I've shared some of those with you, but I don't want to digress. Let's go with the purpose of the talk. It's to review the USS Nimitz Tic Tac UFO incident of 2004. How many are not familiar with this incident? A couple? Okay, very good. This is good. Stephen, surprised. Okay, very good. We're going to go into it. Then we're going to look at recent disclosed USS Theodore Roosevelt UFO encounters in 2015. Actually, another carrier encounter. And discuss the U.S. Navy's new stance on UFOs and how this relates to soft disclosure. Was it John? I was going to bring you up, and I apologize. I wanted to bring John up. In fact, this is a good time to do it. Do you mind? Okay, so John is here. He's you're an engineer at JPL? You've come to some of the meetings. He brought something up to share with me, and I thought it would be really appropriate for him to share it with you, so I'll let him have the podium.
So at the same time that I'm a lifetime ufologist, I'm also a professional engineer. And I'm a graduate of the USC School of Engineering, bachelor's and master's degrees in aerospace and mechanical engineering. I spent nearly 45 years at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory as a systems engineer, which I think is a lot more interesting job than Steve's as a power system engineer on TDRS. But I always wondered in this conservative JPL community I'm in. JPL is a part of Caltech, and Caltech is an extremely conservative establishment engineering and science community. I mean, that doesn't say they're not brilliant, which they are, but they're very conservative. And let me just digress for a second with a couple of words about why the Jet Propulsion Laboratory is named the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. When I went there originally in 1969, I wondered, JPL has never done any work with jet propulsion. So I wondered, why is the place called the Jet Propulsion Laboratory? Well, the interesting thing was, when the laboratory was founded by some really creative Caltech engineers and scientists, they were working with rockets. And so when the laboratory started to gain a lot of traction with launching the first American satellite, Explorer 1 in 1958, they had to argue about what to call the laboratory. And the professors thought if they called it the Rocket Propulsion Laboratory, it would seem to kind of unseemly and unprofessional, because rocket propulsion was a crazy idea out on the fringes. So they finally decided to call the place the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. So that's always struck me as rather funny, given the brilliance of the organization. But anyway, so I always wondered, though, what would it take? What would it take to bring the UFO phenomenon into the mainstream American engineering community? And so what happened? We've got it. I wondered what it would take and how would it present itself to us, the public. And so we have the observations now, this FA-18 encounter with this UFO in 2004 and the observations in 2015. Of course, none of us knew about this because it's been secret ever since the discovery. This is the ultimate all-time UFO observation. This is the ultimate observation. So this is the event, and this publication is the mechanism that it's been brought to us, the public, now. It's called Aerospace America. It's the premier journal of the American aerospace community. And I've been reading this magazine for 50 years, every month. And it has covered it has covered the Apollo program, the space shuttle program, the Space Station Enterprise, or the Space Station program. It's covered every American planetary space mission. It's covered the terrestrial Earth Resources Studies missions, all of the NOAA missions and weather satellites, all of the commercial communication satellite development. It's covered all the Chinese missions, Russian missions, European Space Agency missions, and all of the aircraft developments in the United States, Boeing, all of those abroad by Airbus. Everything has been addressed in this publication. Never before, until this issue, November of this year, had a single word about UFOs ever been printed, because it wasn't legitimate. Now, for the first time, last month, the cover story is Mystery Sightings, examining explanations for the strange phenomena encountered by U.S. Navy pilots. Extraordinary. The editorial board went with this. And so they published a serious evaluation of this encounter. And it is totally groundbreaking to see this in a mainstream publication. So let me take I'm very proud, yes, I waited a lifetime to see this happen. And so let me tell you just really quickly why it's so extraordinary. In the past, even the best observations have been taken with a Brownie camera or an 8mm film or a cell phone or something that could not be compared with other observations. What sets this observation apart is that they were made with the most sophisticated sensor technology in the world, which has had decades of development for use by our military to detect vehicles that are potential threats. And it can detect anything. It can detect rockets, it can detect aircraft, balloons, anything, drones, and it's designed to observe them, not just in visible, but in radar and infrared frequencies. So it has all the sensors to study these phenomena, all on board. So with that sensor package, if that sees something, and it's been calibrated in all kinds of tests against all kinds of targets, if that system sees something, it's real. It's not like a radar observation, but nobody saw it invisible or something other. So what that showed was you can't dismiss it. It cannot be dismissed from an engineering perspective. And then you have the fact that you have visual verification of all the sensor data, and then you have multiple visual observations by different pilots in different airplanes in different period of time, and they all say the same thing. They show impossible technology. The infrared signatures show no form of propulsion. All propulsion gives an infrared, a heat signature, nothing. And yet we see this vehicle making the kinds of moves that have been reported by unprofessional, non-professional observers for years, where these machines can change direction on a dime. They can accelerate to enormous speeds in no time. And no one would believe that because there was no sensor data to back it up. Now there is. We see that data in the data in this article, and it cites that. That's why it can't be ignored now. So I'll tell you what these people said about the phenomenon really quickly, and then I'll close and let you take over, Steve. Well, first of all, it breaks it just really quickly into two categories. Either what we're seeing is terrestrial or it's extraterrestrial. Then it says, well, let's say it's terrestrial. The question is it ours or is it theirs? They look at the fact, is it ours? And they say they don't believe that, as secretive as the US government could be, that this would be withheld from our Navy pilots who are charged with the defense of our nation. So they think that this is real, and it isn't something that is a phony facade of some sort. It's too important. So then the question is it theirs? And their thinking there is, if this was Chinese technology, Russian technology, they would have so much to gain by using it against us. They would never keep it a secret. So they don't believe that it's terrestrial. Now that leaves the extraterrestrial option. And the thing that they bring to light in this article, which is an interesting one, is up until just 5 or 6 years ago, we had never detected a planet around another star in our galaxy. Now, everybody knew that they're almost certainly there, but they'd never been detected until we developed really complex, sophisticated systems to detect planets around other stars. Now we have a catalog of 5,000, and a small number of those, well, maybe actually 10%, are in the so-called Goldilocks zone, which is the zone where life as we know it could evolve. So they say now we have 500 potential worlds that could have launched this technology. And it isn't so far to imagine that faster than light travel is possible and control of gravity is. I mean, before 100 years ago, we didn't know electromagnetic waves even existed. And now we can't live without it, communicating electromagnetically. So we've only discovered gravity waves for the first time in the last 2 years. And now the fact we know they exist suggests it's just another step to control gravity. So if you take faster than light speed and you take control of gravity into account, which, I mean, that enables this to be real. And it is extraterrestrial. It can be. Now, they don't conclude in this article that it is extraterrestrial. That's why they call it a mystery. But they say the mystery cannot be ignored any longer by any serious-minded person. So anyway, that's what I wanted to share. And I'm so happy I had the opportunity to talk to you.
John, thanks so much for sharing that. Yeah, pretty groundbreaking stuff. And this is part of what we call disclosure, or soft disclosure. Disclosure over a period of time, we'd call that soft disclosure rather than hard disclosure where the government just comes out and admits it. Soft disclosure is all around us, and it's happening now. I don't know what the schedule is. Nobody really does. But let's move on with the talk and go into what John was discussing. So the Navy has a new stance on UFOs and how this relates to soft disclosure. Let's talk about the Nimitz and view a film. This is the encounter in 2004.
The vast expanse of Nevada's Badlands stretches endlessly to the horizon. Hidden within these mountain strongholds are some of America's deepest and darkest secrets. Secret aircraft and the other legends of Area 51. Among these sandstone canyons today, there's a new glimmer of truth. Shrouded in mystery, it's a story that demands to be told. These are the witnesses of one of America's most unusual UFO encounters in history. Navy veterans and a band of brothers that want you to know that what they witnessed is real. This is their story. Petty Officer Jason Turner served aboard the USS Princeton in 2004. His personal conviction for democracy and patriotism guides him in his search for the truth.
This is an actual event that happened, and I witnessed it.
Aviation tech Patrick Hughes, a USS Nimitz veteran, he speaks for his shipmates who choose to remain silent.
I'm one of those who has to see to believe, and obviously I've seen the evidence of this, so it exists.
Top Gun Air Intercept Controller Kevin Day and Fire Controlman Gary Voorhees, both from the Princeton, served together in the ship's Combat Information Center. They saw them first, whatever it is they are.
They wanted to show themselves, whatever they were. I don't think they wanted anything really to do with us.
They were literally breaking the laws of physics in my eyes.
These sailors are here for truth and vindication, and their story goes back over a decade to a time and place that marked a departure for all of them, both in their Navy careers, but also in their knowledge of the limits of man's technological understanding of our world. Looking out over the ocean toward the horizon, sun, sea, and sky form an endless vista, a never-ending cycle of tide, wind, and waves. Here, far from shore, strange events have unfolded. These stories stretch the boundaries of our imagination and challenge our beliefs. This is a true story of such events from the accounts of the sailors and naval aviators who experienced them. Professional military service members who want the world to know that what they encountered is real. Even more troubling, our military has no explanation. The answers seem to elude everyone, like reflections on the waves, yet they are out there. November 10th, 2004. 90 miles southwest of San Diego, California, in the Naval Operations Area, the Nimitz Carrier Strike Group and her complement of warships and the aircraft of Air Wing 11 are conducting a routine 2-week training exercise. Nearby, the guided missile cruiser USS Princeton has been tracking unknown aircraft that appear and disappear from her sophisticated Aegis radar screens. The Spy 1 Bravo radar is one of the most advanced sensors ever deployed. Princeton's main role is air defense of the strike group, and Operations Specialist Senior Chief Day is in charge of protecting the airspace around the Nimitz.
And my job was to man the radars and ID everything that flew in the skies. And I also sat a position called Anti-Air Warfare Coordinator, where if we ever had to go to war, I was the guy that was going to launch the missiles and kill shit. In addition to that, I was the air intercept controller. When the Super Hornets take off the carrier, I'm the guy that takes control and takes them to the fight and gets them home safe.
Air, tactical air.
And there was a lot of experience in that room. The captain had 28 years, I had 18 years. And the Aegis ship is our newest weapons system afloat. It's got the Spy 1 radar system, phased array radar system, and I was an expert on that.
Inside the Combat Information Center, Chief Day's attention is focused on a group of unknown aircraft on the Spy 1 screen. He's trying to identify them.
I was on watch, and we were probably 100 miles, I forget how far exactly that day we were, off the coast of San Diego southwest, kind of off the coast of Mexico, Baja. And I started to notice these weird tracks that were popping onto my radar coverage right about on San Clemente Island. And the reason why I say they were weird, because they were appearing in groups of 5 to 10 at a time, and they were pretty closely spaced to each other, and they were 28,000 feet going 100 knots tracking south. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, you know, that's kind of odd. I mean, I don't know anything that flies like that. They weren't on the ComAir routes, the commercial airline routes. I wasn't really that concerned about them. I didn't consider them hostile for any reason at all. Another watch or two, as I'm watching, the same formation appeared again. And over the course of 3-4 days, it probably counted up to that point, groups of 5 to 10 at a time. There were probably 50, 60 tracks by then.
Today, Kevin and Gary are still looking for answers. They've known each other for over a decade since their Navy days. Gary was a third-class petty officer and fire controlman back then.
I worked on the Aegis computer system on a CG-59 guided missile cruiser, the USS Princeton. I'm in charge of CEC and data recording and maintaining and operating all the mainframes that run the system.
They're both becoming increasingly frustrated in their attempts to ID the strange aerial objects, which have no transponders and fit no known flight profiles.
The guys that work on the Spy 1 Bravo radar, they had come across and said they needed to take the system down for recalibration because they were getting clutter or ghost tracks, and they needed to recalibrate to get rid of them. Then once they did finish all that recalibration, bring it back up, the tracks didn't disappear. They were still there, but they were actually sharper and clearer.
They were doing diagnostic tests on everything we had to make sure it was not a system malfunction. And it turned out that it wasn't. These were actually real objects. I had the highest spy track quality possible on these contacts.
In this situation, I actually started recording on all 4 tapes at the same time. That way, it was a one continuous loop, and I was just replacing them as they were, becoming full.
We failed utterly to identify these things. It didn't meet any of the parameters for anything that was known.
In some cases, they seem to descend from space and then suddenly plunge to near sea level in seconds. Coupled with the unidentified nature of the craft and lack of clearance, these extreme flight observations are very troubling to the crew assigned to protect the carrier group from aerial threats. Sunday, November 14th, morning. The Nimitz deck crew is busy launching FA-18F Super Hornets, helicopters, and E-2 Hawkeye early warning planes. The mission? Simulated air defense, or ADEX training over the Pacific. The winds are calm, the skies are clear, a near perfect day for flying. As they launch, the Black Aces Squadron has no knowledge of events happening nearby.
In the back of my mind, that's when I determined I was going to become concerned about these objects, is we were getting ready to launch a whole bunch of aircraft in that same piece of sky.
Fast Eagle climbs out to 20,000 feet and heads to the cap station about 40 miles south of the carrier. The cap is a rendezvous point used to form up with the other airplanes.
Just 25 miles separation.
The commander of Fast Eagle has over a decade in the Air Wing. His wingman for the day is a new pilot, a young officer on her first carrier deployment. She's paired with a senior pilot, her backseat weapons system officer for the mission. He will manage navigation and the advanced radar and targeting pods on the aircraft. Overhead, an E-2 Hawkeye from the Wallbanger Squadron is on station directing the aircraft. Banger provides eye-in-the-sky command and control during carrier flight operations. Back in the Combat Information Center on Princeton, the mysterious objects are back. And today is the first time Senior Chief Day has jets in the air that can intercept the mysterious aircraft.
Seeing these contacts, Captain Smith orders me to intercept one of them. So I went back to the console. I picked the closest one that was to us, and I had intended to let the Hawkeye do the intercept because they already had control. It was just easier.
Day briefs the captain, and they agree to send the Hornets. The Air Intercept Controller aboard Princeton, call sign Charlie, radios the Hawkeye and takes control of Fast Eagle.
Banger, Charlie. Charlie, this is Banger, go ahead. Banger, Charlie. Do you hold unknown air contact, bra, 27048, 28,000 feet, bogey? Charlie, Banger, negative. Radar picture is clean.
The E-2 radar operators have been frustrated in their attempts to get a radar return on the unknown aerial target that Princeton is tracking. Even with their 24-foot radar dish, they can't get a lock on the object.
Banger, Charlie. Transfer Fast Eagle flight to Charlie Control, button 13. We have a real-world tasking for them. Charlie, Banger, roger. Fast Eagle, Charlie, stand by for real-world tasking.
Charlie, Fast Eagle, send it.
We vector towards that position in the sky, and real quiet on the radio. I'm just giving them bra calls, which is bearing range altitude, to these unknown bogey group. And basically I'm just telling their crew where the object is, the bearing from them, and the range from them, and the altitude so they can drive towards it.
Contact bra 27041, 20,000 feet, bogey, snap, 270, over.
Roger, bearing 270, 41 miles. 100, go trail.
100.
Say state.
State 12,000 pounds. Clean, do you have it?
I'm trying to get a track on it now. They sent link 16, but my radar picture is clean.
The next radio call takes everyone by surprise.
Fast Eagle 110, say loadout. 110, what's your weapons loadout?
Yeah, the tactical action officer, the TAO, jumps on the radio. Her name was Lieutenant Elders, and she just point blank asked the Fast Eagle flight if they were carrying any type of weapons. And there was a stunned pause on the radio.
Wings clean, Princeton. We just have CADAM training missiles, and they're not coming off the rail.
We're in an exercise environment, and the last thing we wanted to do is start shooting stuff.
Now the controllers have the pilot's undivided attention. Normally, the squadron doesn't carry live ordnance when training.
What do you guys think that was about?
What, about the loadout? I have no idea. Maybe it's drug runners or something. Yeah, it could be. Or a lost assassin out of SoCal.
I don't like this.
Fast Eagle, Charlie, contact bra 16034, 8,000 feet, bogey.
Roger, 34 miles at 8,000. Committed, your call, continuing.
As Fast Eagle approaches the target, they see nothing unusual. Their onboard radars can't get a lock on the object.
Fast Eagle, Charlie, bra 16010, 8,000 feet.
Roger.
Fast Eagle, Charlie, merge plot.
Basically what the merge plot means on the radar, you got two objects in the same vertical piece of sky, so when I'm looking at the 2D display, it looks like a one radar blob now.
Confirm the object appears stationary.
I had it at 17.7. Showing, again, basically no airspeed on it.
Hey, you guys seeing us? What is that?
As the Super Hornets approach the target, they see a disturbance on the ocean surface. It's about the size of a 737, and it looks like something could be just below the surface.
100, anchor here, Angels 2-4.
Roger.
Charlie, Fast Eagle. We're observing something in the water here, possibly aircraft in the water at the merge plot, just north of our position, about 2 miles.
Charlie, roger.
I'm descending to Angels 14 to take a look.
Do you think that's our unknown?
Man, not sure. Radar's clean.
As soon as he got to the merge plot position, the object that he was intercepting dropped from 28,000 feet down to 50 feet above the water in 0.78 seconds, as I found out later the next day.
As the Super Hornets get closer to the ocean disturbance, he suddenly spots another craft above it, a much smaller white object with an oblong shape, hovering, then darting just above the waves. The object is moving around erratically, seemingly focused on the white water. The shape is similar to a tic-tac. It's smooth like porcelain. It's not an airplane. Suddenly, the object begins to rise into the air. The strange craft begins mirroring the turn rate of Fast Eagle.
Charlie 1 Vulgate, 287, 2 miles, Angels 5.
The object is now at his 3 o'clock position as he continues to turn with it.
He's turning hard at 3,000 meters.
We had the external communications in the speaker in combat so everyone could listen to it. And the next thing I hear in the radio going, oh my God, I'm engaged, I'm engaged.
1,000 meters, he's southwest, Angels 8.
The commander is now about a mile away as he maneuvers his Hornet to get behind the unknown craft. It's about the size of an F-18, about 47 feet long, and it has no wings. As the dogfight unfolds, he quickly turns and dives to bring his jet's nose ahead of the object to close the distance. Suddenly, the tic-tac rockets past. It's gone beyond the horizon in the blink of an eye.
I saw it go 137. No tally.
That didn't just happen.
Say again.
Fast Eagle Charlie, sir, you're not going to believe this, but the bogey group is now back at your cap station.
As Fast Eagle returns to the area of the ocean disturbance, the object is gone, and the sea is once again calm. Soon, they land on the ship. Back on board Banger, the flight crew has been listening to the radio transmissions from Fast Eagle. The crew has been tracking the intercepts on their advanced display systems called the CEC. One of the radar operators, who wishes to remain anonymous, describes hearing the fear in the pilots' voices, and he knows this is no drill.
I had a good friend who flew on the Hawkeyes. We've been calling him Roger to protect his identity because he didn't want to come forward at this time, but he wanted to contribute to the story to verify that it actually happened. So there were 5 people in the airplane. Roger would have been sitting in the radar officer seat, which is towards the back middle of the plane. To the side of each one of them, or behind them, depending how the chair's rotating, is a window.
Suddenly, his attention is drawn to something outside the Hawkeye. He and the entire crew watch in disbelief as a tic-tac object suddenly forms up on their E2 and then just as quickly shoots away from sight. The crew is left in disbelief. As Banger returns to the ship, the crew is shaken. The highly unusual events are troubling, but what happens next has haunted them to this day. U.S. Navy officers quickly arrive and escort the aircrew to a secure space on the ship. As the crewmen begin to take off their flight gear, an officer begins the debriefing by telling them this event did not happen, and they are given non-disclosure agreements to sign. They're warned to never discuss this event again.
Again, we're preparing for the air defense exercise. Now we got all the squadrons launching off the carrier because they're all up going to do their functional check flights.
Senior Chief Day watched in disbelief as the tic-tac UFOs reacted to the incoming fighter jets.
All the objects in the sky, they all dropped out of the sky, from 28,000 feet down to 50 feet.
Based on the Spy 1 Bravo radar system, the object descended at over 24,000 miles an hour.
It was unbelievable because normally what would happen if a normal aircraft did that? First of all, it would fly apart. It wouldn't be able to withstand the G-forces, and there would be multiple sonic booms. It would be boom, 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 and this did not make any sonic booms.
From what I observed, I saw that it went from, right around between 25 and 30,000 feet down to sea level and below sea level.
Contact, tag number 042.
Below sea level was confirmed to me by the actual sonar techs that were in combat, in communications with other techs that had said they had an active track on it under the water. They're talking with their sonar guys on the sub that was with us, and I mean, I was told directly that it did go underwater. It went from being in the air to underwater. From what they were saying, it was going averaging about 500 knots under the water. So it did slow down when it hit the water, but it didn't affect it inertially.
After the intercepts, both Kevin and Gary climbed up to the ship's bridge wing to get a better view of the objects through the binoculars.
We go up to the bridge wing and look at them through the big eyes, which is heavily magnified binoculars that are out on the bridge wing of the ship.
Even when I was off watch, I was usually up in combat anyway, and I was sitting at the console. I just picked the closest object to us, and I got the relative bearing from the ship, slave over to the relative bearing of about the right altitude, and saw this white light in the sky.
The movements were smooth to erratic. They just moved from one point to another. It was always a very sharp and clean movement. It always felt like a constant speed, not like speeding up. Just it needed to go to that point, and it decided to do it at this speed. And then it would just go from nothing to the speed they were going to go, and then stop at the next point.
Meanwhile, back on the Nimitz, aviation tech Patrick Hughes is working to secure the classified data recorders from the Hawkeye that encountered the Tic Tac.
We pull out their hard drives. We call them RMCs. We call them bricks because they physically heavy like a brick. But they contain the software to run the airplane. And they also record a lot of the data that the aircrew sees during the flight. So we take the removable stuff, we take it out, we go downstairs, back to our shop.
Patrick's job involves tracking the chain of custody of the hard drives.
Then we open up the safe, put them in the safe. We've got tracking sheets so we know what RMCs are on what airplane. We know who signed them out, who put them in the airplane, who took them out of the airplane.
As he gets ready to wrap up the mission, there's a knock on the door.
Our commanding officer's there, two other guys in flight suits who I'm assuming were Air Force officers, because pretty sure that's the insignia they had on. But they were not on the ship earlier. I did not see them come on the ship, so I'm not sure how they got there. But the skipper basically said, I need the bricks off the flight. We opened the safe, we put them in the bags. He took them, he took his 2 anonymous officers and left.
The officers, with the classified hard drives in hand, soon board an HS-60 Seahawk helicopter and leave Nimitz. Soon thereafter, Petty Officer Voorhees has his own visit by unknown officials on the Princeton.
Once they landed and everybody got off, then about maybe 20 minutes later, I got called in to have all my data recording tapes turned over. And then also told that I needed to reload CEC because it had been wiped. So it was, so I turned over all the tapes, and then they also said if there's any even blank tapes to erase anything else that's in the shop. Well, they were plainclothes people that came aboard on the helicopter. It was my chain of command that took control of the tapes from me. The helo left with them after that, so because we went right back to flight ops.
The link between the Tic Tacs and these men is unknown. How they became aware of the UFO encounters and how they arrived so quickly on board after the event is also a mystery. The video you are now watching is the actual gun camera FLIR footage of the Tic Tac taken by a later flight. This is the first video ever released by the U.S. government showing military planes engaging UFOs. The advanced targeting pod, known as ATFLIR, works in both TV mode and infrared mode. The film reveals no control surfaces, no exhaust plume, a uniform heat signature, and no visible means of propulsion. Gary and his shipmates saw the FLIR film on their consoles and on the secret LAN aboard the Princeton.
It was a much clearer video. You could see the shape of the ship. You could see it, moving. I tried to go and get a disc to come make a copy of it, and by the time I got back, it was already off of our hard drive, off the secret LAN. No access to it whatsoever.
Petty Officer Jason Turner also saw a much higher resolution version of the FLIR film showing strange appendages extending from the object.
But it did have some protruding at the bottom of it. I couldn't tell if they were curled back or straight down.
Jason says the video was approximately 10 minutes in length and much longer than the video that has been released.
I saw this video playing and I'd ask him, is this what we're training, or what's part of this training that we're going through? And he said, no, this is real life. And when I saw it, it was a very clear image, a very clear video, and this thing was going berserk, like making turns, like it's incredible. The amount of G-forces that it would put on a human that this thing was doing. The jets were like trying to trail this thing, and it would just run off and leave them. It would just poof, gone, and then it would come back, and then you would see it, and then it made a maneuver, like they were chasing it straight on. It was going with them. This thing stopped, turned, and just phew, gone. That's the only way to describe what it looked like.
Dude, this is a fucking drone, bro. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh.
Just 11 years later, fighter jets from USS Roosevelt filmed this anomalous object in 2015.
Well, if there's look at this thing. It's rotated.
Like the Nimitz encounter, they too were conducting routine training when fleets of UFOs were encountered by the pilots. The Nimitz encounters remained cloaked secrecy for over 13 years. The first-hand testimony about UFO sightings is practically unheard of from military service members. Thanks to the brave and honest accounts of the sailors and naval aviators who have come forward to relate their experiences, and of the remarkable videos they filmed that day, the silence has been broken.
I dealt with this all on my own for many, many years, and it was not a very pleasant journey to go through, because no one really believes you. But now things have changed, and anyone out there that's struggling with this and wants to reach out, there is now a group that you can reach out to and get help and support and vindication.
It's honestly been a little relieving to be able to actually talk about it how important that event really was, and not just keep blowing it off. There's people out here that really need to know and want to know, and you have the support of me and Kevin and my other shipmates that have come forward and decided to talk about it.
My role is to describe the story and convince people that yes, this event really happened and these objects were really real, but what they are, I have no idea.
It is something. I want to know what it is. That's the whole reason I chose to come forward to contribute to the story, because there is a story here, there is more information here. And the more of us that talk about it, the better chance of the full story coming together.
And it's vindication for us that other people are looking into it, and we finally tell our story and people listen.
If you need to get a hold of us or would like to talk to any of us, Kevin, me, or any of the other guys that have come forward, there'll be an email address at the end of this video that you can contact them and they can get a hold of us.
If you or someone you know has witnessed unknown objects from military ships or planes, please contact us at the address on your screen. You can remain anonymous. As we strive to understand these encounters and come to terms with what they mean, there's something far beyond the horizon and the limits of our comprehension waiting for all of us.
My apologies to Dave Beatty. The PowerPoint doesn't have his name there. Should have been sitting there the whole time. I thought this was an excellent summation of the event, and there's more to it. So let's move on from there. And the weird part was they were coming off San Clemente Island, and they'd been loitering for days. Actually, 3 days they'd been being observed by Kevin Day and other people on the Princeton. And they had the Aegis Spy 1 radar. So again, it's the most classified, the best sensors that in the world. And he had been watching these things, and others had been watching these things around 3 days. And they're only moving at about 100 knots. And they're going from, they didn't mention this in the film, but they were going from 80,000 feet, which is where the thing tops out. They were coming in from 80,000 feet, dropping down instantaneously to 28,000 feet, and then sitting there moving at 100 knots. And then dropping down to sea level or below sea level. And this has been going on. And at first, they just thought they were anomalous blips. But then that last day, they were having flight ops, and these things were encroaching in the airspace. And Petty Officer Day said, "Hey, I've got to do something. I've got to bring this to the CO's attention." So he actually went to the CO himself and briefed him on it, and other people knew about it. There was a buzz going on about these things, and the CO agreed with him and said, "Yeah, we've got to vector some aircraft and take a look at these things." So it turned out they had already launched 2 F-18s at 0900. It was fairly late op, but so Fast Eagle was up, and Commander David Fravor, who you'll meet in a second, he had the most flight hours of any naval officer on the ship. He was the CO of his squadron. He is the man that had the visual and the air combat encounter. Let's move on to this. So this story broke December 16, 2017. I mentioned I was in Jamaica at the time. The New York Times, Washington Post simultaneously came out with the story, and it was broken under the auspices of ATIP, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, that had been researching UFOs for 5 years. This is the cover story, okay, from 2007 to 2012. In that time frame, $22 million was allocated to the study. It was initiated by Senator Harry Reid, Democrat of Nevada, to study unexplained aerial phenomenon at the urging of Reid's friend, Nevada businessman and governmental contractor Robert Bigelow. And guys recognize that name? Yeah, interesting character. He's the guy that bought Skinwalker Ranch. Okay, let's look at more of this. Program was headed by Luis Elizondo. That's ATIP. Was headed up by a guy named Luis Elizondo, who is a CIA guy. He's reassigned from the Pentagon in 2017 to protest. He resigned from the Pentagon in 2017. Allegedly resigned to protest that the government wasn't taking this seriously. Simultaneously, FA-18 pilot Commander David Fravor goes public with his now famous USS Nimitz Tic Tac incident. So now you're going to hear from the pilot who actually flew on this thing. Okay? Here we go. I bet that guy never thought he'd be talking about UFOs when he assumed command of that squadron. Holy smokes. We're going to talk about the CAP. CAP, it's an old acronym, Civil Air Patrol Rendezvous Point. And they just kept using that. So CAP is a rendezvous point that is, it's known to the pilots, it's known to the computers that are on board the planes when they go on a mission, but it's classified. So it's not something known. For this UFO to be sitting there, this Tic Tac, to be sitting at their CAP point after it dodged them, tells you a lot. It tells you it knew, either it decoded the computers or somehow knew where to be, where these guys were going to head next, right? So either way, it basically broke through classified encryption. Okay. Besides multiple pilots who experienced the Tic Tac UFO incident, radar and radio operators had their own experiences. Our presentation is getting a little long now. This is radar operator Trevor's story. I think I want to, well, let's go ahead and listen to it. Let's hear what he has to say.
What is your name? What was your rank? And what were your duties?
My first name is Trevor. I will not disclose my last name. I was an operations specialist. I was a E4. My duties were pretty much air and surface radar. I also worked on a system called Chibital, and I did a bunch of other stuff too within my division.
We're talking about the 2004 Nimitz Tic Tac UFO events. You were on board and part of that deployment. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
We're just doing like workups, like JTFX, going out to the operating area and playing war games and testing out equipment and doing all those sorts of things and training people. I was actually on the air radar side at that time, specifically. Everything went down within however many days. I was seeing things on the radar. I just remember the one day where it was very obvious that something was going on in the top left side of that box, operating box. Because we all have our own specific boxes that we do circles in. I just thought it was suspicious. I mean, with all the experience and the things that I've seen.
And so we're talking about 2004 on the Nimitz.
Mm-hmm. I was senior on Chibital. I was one of the senior people on air radar. I was in charge of scenic or low vis supply PO.
You were in charge of an aspect of radar operations on the Nimitz during that UFO event.
Correct, yes. I was part of an air watch team, yes.
In 2004, between November 10th through November 14th, when there was a whole series of events, there was a crescendo. Commander David Fravor and the flight group that went after him came back with footage of these events and came back on board. But your experience was a little different. You were in a secure radar room and started to notice something strange, and you were the first to notice it.
Yeah, we were in CDC.
What is that?
Combat Direction Center, what they call, quote-unquote, the heart of the ship.
So you're having a normal day, you're watching your radar scans, you're supposed to be tagging aircraft, and all of a sudden you're seeing these anomalous blips coming in and out off of your screen, and you're thinking, what's going on? We're not in a war zone, we're in a U.S. controlled area. You at that point alert or notify your superiors, and they kind of look at it and say, okay, keep going. They don't make a big deal about it.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm. Because you're training people too. We're just doing workups. I mean, we're not in a hot zone. So
if you were in a hot zone, this would be a threat.
Oh, they'd be all over it. F-18s would have been over there.
In seeing these blips come in your radar, if you were in a war zone, the alerts would go off. They'd shoot F-18s over there. This would be a big deal.
Right.
And these objects that were coming in and out of your screen, did they appear to be moving fast? Is that why they were?
Yes. Like, so meaning it would be stationary, and then boom, it would move. Then it would just chill there. Whereas If it's aircraft, it would be moving, like a solid movement across the screen. Whereas here, it's like jumping around. That's the only way I could describe it, jumping around. That's what was funky. I mean, how could something move so fast like that? I've never seen it on your radar.
So not possible.
Oh, hell no.
You're seeing these targets moving in extraordinary ways that would be considered a threat anywhere else if you were in a hostile territory, and and you can't tag them, you can't mark them. You alert whoever's in command above you, and they look at it and they tell you just keep working.
Yeah, basically, yeah. They ignored it.
And you can't tell if it was multiple objects.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you that.
How many anomalous targets did you see during that course of the beginning of observing this on your radar?
I mean, I'm on watch 6 to 8 hours, so the whole time I was on watch.
Is this the day that the whole ship became alerted that evening that pilots came in with footage?
The only thing I could tell you is that, yes, it is that day. I'll never forget that day the rest of my life. I gave my pass down, the end of my watch, I gave my pass down, and I passed down that activity. And I passed down that activity one specific person, too. And that one specific person is the one that called me to come up and look at the video.
So you are relieved of your command. You go back to your berthing. In being relieved of your command, you pass the information forward to somebody, and in an unusual move, you were called to view some footage because I guess they felt like they owed you that much for being the first to actually see and try to target these things. So can you explain to me, you're in your berthing, what exactly happens?
Get a phone call. I didn't think nothing of it. So I get the phone. He's like, dude, you got to get up here right now and check this out. He goes, you're right. I didn't run, but I hauled ass up to CDC. I got up there, and sure enough, they brought me over, sat down, watched the video. I watched it with a few officers, a couple that were, pilots and, a few that weren't. Many of these people have had, eons in the Navy. So, yeah, we're just sitting there watching the video and slow-moing the video, watching it several times. It blew my mind.
And the footage you saw, you describe it very differently than what is out there about the events. What do you see on the screen?
You can see that the F-18s are moving, and you see this object mimic the F-18s. This object had shot basically from the ocean up. You could see that. That object made a couple different quick maneuvers. So if the F-18 made a banked left, it mocked the F-18s every time.
Describing the object mirroring the pilot, so actually mirroring the movements, like mocking the movements. It was outpacing our best fighter planes.
Oh, easy. Oh my God, yeah. The last part of the video that I remember is that this object, if you're looking at the screen, it went left and then it banked straight up. I mean, it was insane. I couldn't even explain, it just went to the left really fast and went boom, went straight up. And I know this was on the SIPRNet because we slowed it down, they slowed it down by frame, basically in slow-mo. And you could see where this thing, it doesn't even exist, it skips time, where it's that fast that you cannot see this object for a period of a couple frames. And then it just, boom, it goes up. And I remember the officer saying, there's nothing on this planet that can do that. It's not possible. That's what they were trying to point out, too. The officer's like, when we slow-mode the video, you didn't see it for so many frames. You wouldn't see the object for several frames. And then you saw it, and then, boom, it was gone. When it made that maneuver, it would basically disintegrate. Into pieces.
So it was so fast, and the G-forces would have been so spectacular, your cameras couldn't even pick it up.
Exactly. Yep, that's exactly it. It looked more domey to me, and it's flat on the bottom, but everybody says tic-tac, I don't remember that at all. Straight dome, like a flat bottom.
What you saw did not look like a tic-tac or an oblong object.
No, it looked just like a flying saucer, just like we all know, we've all seen reports of, just a dome with a flat bottom.
So this footage you saw is different than the footage that you see has been released by the Department of Defense.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, because I've watched it several times and it's not the same. I definitely saw different footage during those 2004 events of a different object by far. The object that I saw was a flying saucer shape, not a tic-tac.
It's sounding more and more like the footage you saw is not the footage that was released by the Department of Defense.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
We're talking about a flying saucer that was under the water, and dozens of tic-tacs were dropping down from 80,000 feet to dock with it that you got to see clear as day on footage.
Correct.
That footage is probably never going to get out, but you saw it.
I don't think they'll ever release it. And I think footage that they do release and will release, they're going to make it fuzzy. They're not going to make it clear for you guys, and they're going to cut it up.
Why?
They don't want people to know that that technology's out there, especially when what I've seen, where, you see that object skip that time and just shoot straight up into space. There's nothing that can do that.
So they're showing us a whitewashed version. What you saw was so impressive. If people saw that, they might freak out.
Oh, yeah, I think so. It's a pretty clear video. That day changed my whole perspective on life. It blew my mind. I knew there was more in this world and universe than anything imaginable.
What this one operator saw was different from what we've seen publicly released. The films, the 3 films that were released. His was very clear, and he describes it, flying saucer, right? That's an interesting little twist to the story that you don't hear about a lot, but I thought that Jeremy Corbell did a good job digging that up. How many people here remember what Kevin Day, the other radar operator, said the speed was of one of these things coming down? 20, yeah, I think he said 24,000 miles per hour. And no breaking sound. Now this guy who just spoke said that frame by frame, some of the frames it was missing, or like it was disappearing through frames. And when you have zero, and these things are essentially, I always say this, and I know it sounds like crazy, but these things are they're essentially time machines. They're translating through our time space in instantaneous frames. So they're time machines. They move with zero inertia in our physics. So, of course, you can outmaneuver any jet that we have because we have to obey the laws of our own gravity, right? These things do not operate according to gravity. Gravity does not exist to them. All right, moving on. Tucker Carlson, this is what happened after the release. Tucker Carlson, we always love him. Maybe not. Luis Elizondo. This is the guy that's head of ATIP.
UFOs have captivated the public interest for decades, but they've always been dismissed, including by me, as the province of wackos. But that is changing thanks to some remarkable videotape and firsthand accounts from very sober people who are trained to identify aircraft. And that would include this video. It shows 2 Navy pilots encountering something bizarre off the east coast of the United States. Watch this.
Nickel 61 Tango, Roger, Roger. Roger, there's troubleshooting.
Did you box moving target?
No, I took an auto track.
Oh, okay.
Oh my gosh, dude.
Wow.
Okay, these are guys who fly for a living, who know what other airplanes look like, including those maintained by foreign governments, and they're totally shocked by this. This is one among many incidents like it, including many that have happened in the middle of the day to sober people, lots of independent witnesses at the same event, commercial pilots, military pilots, O'Hare Airport in the afternoon. None of them have obvious explanations. These are aircraft, apparently, that are moving in ways that appear to violate physics, that are flying very differently from any aircraft ever observed, and way faster than any plane that we know any foreign country has. What is this? Well, we don't know, because for some reason the Defense Department is not interested in finding out. Luis Elizondo is a former Pentagon official. He helped research UFOs. He said the DoD is not taking any of this seriously for some reason. Mr. Elizondo joins us tonight. Luke, good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
So did I overstate that? Is there a growing corpus of evidence, not drunk people on a lonely rural road at 3 in the morning, but sober military pilots saying something that we can't explain is happening?
That is correct. You're talking about individuals who have very high security clearances. They are trained observers. We've actually paid them and put them through schools to be trained and very keen observers to scrutinize what they're seeing. These are individuals who we trust to fly weapons platforms, sometimes with live munitions, over U.S. cities and to fight and win wars on our behalf. And they're reporting to us that they're seeing something that they can't explain, and it's also being backed up by the video evidence and the radar data and other witnesses.
But these must just be weather balloons, right?
Well, the weather balloons that are expressing technologies that are far beyond our current understanding of aerodynamics, things that are maneuvering in ways that no aircraft that we are currently aware of has that capability to. Flight performance characteristics that are well beyond the threshold of what we would consider, I think, normal or routine for aircraft.
So they have no flight surfaces, no wings or anything approaching a wing, and there's also no obvious propulsion. So infrared doesn't pick up any jet trail or rocket exhaust coming out of these things.
Right, or a plume. You know, there's many ways to have propulsion. You can do it with a jet engine, for example,
right,
a propeller, or a rocket engine. In this particular case, you have objects that are doing things, maneuvering in ways without any obvious sign of propulsion, and defying the natural effects of Earth's gravitational.
At what speeds?
Pull. Some are very, very, very fast.
Faster than our aircraft or
absolutely, hypersonic speeds. And by the way, without any obvious signs or signatures involved. So when an object's moving through the atmosphere, you would expect it to have certain signatures associated with that particular aircraft, whether it's a missile, drone, rocket. So, for example, you might see a heat signature coming from it. You might see ionization of the atmosphere.
Right.
You might hear a sonic boom, which you normally would. It's an acoustic signature. In this particular case, these objects don't have any of those signatures.
So we know that they're not U.S. military because they wouldn't be flying near U.S. military aircraft as they so often have. And it seems like we would know if foreign countries had that technology. Look, I have no idea what it is. The bottom line is this is a potential threat, a grave one to our country. What is DoD doing about it?
Well, I can't speak on behalf of DoD right now because I'm no longer employed as a Department of Defense employee, but I can speak to what they were doing about it and what they weren't doing about it when I was part of the program. I think DoD is a very large, complex organization. I think it's very good at what it normally does, but in this particular case, we had a very ill-defined problem set. And so when you're going to the boss and you say, look, boss, we have something here, we don't know what it is, we sure don't know how it works, and by the way, there's nothing we can do about it. That is a very difficult conversation to have in an organization that is, its sole mission is national security,
it's
right?
I think it's terrifying. I mean, this seems potentially like one of the biggest stories of my lifetime, and I don't care if it's about UFOs or whatever you call it. Something that we don't understand is getting very close to our military aircraft, and the government isn't responding adequately, and I hope you keep sounding the alarm on this.
Yeah, I think, if I may, just very quickly.
We got 10 seconds.
Okay, you go to the metro, you see a sign, see something, say something, and we get an attaboy for reporting it. In this particular case, these pilots who are seeing something and is backed up by other data, it's nothing.
It's terrifying. That's the essence of dysfunction. Lou, thank you for that. I hope you'll come back.
Luis Elizondo, ATIP, and To the Stars Academy. So, you know, my assessment of Luis Elizondo is he is basically a speaker or a mouthpiece for soft disclosure. So the cover story behind Luis, he worked for ATIP, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, from 2007 to 2012. That was the story. And then because he became disgruntled because the government, his bosses, weren't taking what he was studying seriously enough, so he decided to go out on his own. And recruited then by To the Stars Academy, headed up by what's Tom DeLonge of Blink 182 as their quarterback. Anyway, it's an interesting cover story, but basically it's a way to it gives the government or certain powers that be a way to bleed this information out to you in little pieces and see how you respond to it. That's my assessment. That's my personal opinion. Okay, moving on.
George Knapp. Now, this happened fairly recently, last April, May timeframe of this year. So let's go into this a little bit. This is where it gets interesting. So this is fast forward from, remember, 2017 was the first disclosure, and now we're into 2019.
U.S. Navy officials issue a stunning statement that the Navy is developing new policies to make it easier for pilots and other military personnel to file official reports about encounters with unexplained aerial phenomenon, otherwise known as UFOs.
And what's behind this dramatic announcement, and is it related to the UFO videos which were made public at the end of 2017? The I-Team's George Knapp live in studio with an exclusive update.
Yeah, this statement by the Navy is startling. It was done in response to what the Navy says is an increasing number of intrusions of our airspace by unknown craft. It comes after 15 months of conflicting statements from the Pentagon about secret UFO research, including claims that the study, sponsored by Nevada Senator Harry Reid, wasn't really about UFOs, and that the 3 videos weren't really released by the Department of Defense. Suffice to say, we now know those Pentagon statements are not accurate. The U.S. Navy's 2004 encounter with an object called the Tic Tac UFO.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA.
The 2015 incursion by multiple unknowns off the coast of Florida, dubbed Gimbal. And a zippy craft aptly known as Go Fast. 2 of these 3 videos were made public in December 2017, released simultaneously by the New York Times and the To the Stars Academy. The provenance of the videos has been disputed ever since.
The videos were released by the Department of Defense. The Department of Defense made the decision to release them.
Someone gave it a green light.
Absolutely. And it wasn't me.
Luis Elizondo was a career intelligence officer who for nearly a decade directed ATIP, a secret Pentagon effort that studied and analyzed UFO cases, encounters between unknown craft and military units. The program was initiated at the insistence of Nevada Senator Harry Reid. In 2017, Elizondo left the Pentagon, in part because he felt these incidents were not being given the priority they deserve. But before he left, he initiated a process to get the 3 videos and many more declassified so the public could see them. He insists these encounters are not isolated incidents.
ATIP did find a lot of stuff. This wasn't just a one-off looking at the Nimitz incident. There were many, many incidents we looked at, and we looked at them on a continuing basis.
Pentagon spokespersons have been fuzzy about the legitimacy of the videos, and critics have pounced on the ambiguity. But the I-Team has now obtained part of the paper trail. This is a DD-1910, the final step in a multi-step process issued by the Department of Defense Office of Pre-Publication and Security Review. The request specifies the 3 videos, Go Fast, Gimbal, and FLIR, which was the original name for Tic Tac. Some personal information has been redacted, but the document shows authorization for release was granted on August 24, 2017. The I-Team has also acquired the DoD directive, which spells out how the release procedure works. This form shows the videos were released by the book. Senator Reid, who helped initiate the ATIP program, has confirmed there's a lot more where these came from.
You cannot just hide your head and say it does. These things aren't happening. We have military installations where hundreds and hundreds of people who are there see these things.
After the I-Team obtained the paperwork, we asked Elizondo if this is the form he filed with the Pentagon. He said he's not authorized to comment, that it's up to the Department of Defense. It is known that the 3 videos and the pilots involved in those encounters were part of several closed-door briefings given to Congress over the past year. High-ranking Navy officials joined some of those briefings and reportedly were just as surprised as congressional staff. That ongoing effort is what led to last week's stunning announcement by naval officials. They now want to encourage pilots to report unusual encounters without fear of damaging their careers. The briefings for Congress underway for the past year or so were arranged by a man named Chris Mellon, who formerly worked for the Senate Intelligence Committee and also for the Department of Defense. Mellon, now with To the Stars Academy, sent a statement to us saying that after senior Navy officials joined the briefings, they realized it was, quote, indefensible to not have a system that allows more reporting of these incidents. We have his full statement and other supporting material on our website, and we want to thank Senator Reid for his help in obtaining containing documentation related to this report. More to come.
At least they didn't play the X-Files theme. So it's interesting. George Knapp, who's friends with Robert Bigelow, who's also friends with, Jim Murillo. George Knapp is involved in this, and he interviews all these different people, including Jeremy Corbell and here friends. So they're somehow being brought in as part of the disclosure process. Knapp, Corbell, they're being given information, and it's coming out to you guys. All right. April 23rd, 2019, Politico breaks a story of the U.S. Navy drafting a new guidelines for reporting UFOs. They were alluding to it in the last story. The U.S. Navy has drafted new guidelines for pilots and other personnel to report encounters with unidentified aircraft. And it's the result of, in response to a series of sightings of unknown, highly advanced aircraft, including Navy strike groups and other sensitive military formations and facilities. Navy is updating and formalizing the process by which reports of any such suspected incursions can be made to the cognizant authority. A new message to the fleet that will detail the steps up for reportings and draft. So that was back in April. I haven't seen the form yet, but I'm sure it's out there somewhere floating around. But it gives basically Navy personnel the ability to report these things without fear of, some kind of black cloud over their performance record. Okay, let's move on. Whoops. Okay, this broke May 26, 2019 in New York Times. Wow, what is that? Navy pilots report unexplained flying objects. And this is the result of, this article highlights, the byline is Leslie Kane and others who broke the 2017 story. Okay, so in the New York Times 2017 December, the same authors break this story, beginning to notice a pattern. The pilots began noticing that objects after their 80s era radar was upgraded to more advanced systems as one fighter jet after another got the new radar. Strange objects appeared almost daily from the summer of 2014 to March 2015. Summer of 2014 to March 2015 on a daily basis, okay? Roughly 9 months of daily UFO encounters. 9 months times 30 days, 270 encounters, minus 20% for no activity, I guess, gives us over 200 military-grade encounters in that short period of time, okay? Good high-fidelity data recording. Lieutenant Ryan Graves says these things would be out there all day, 12 hours at a time. That's a long time for observation. 200 encounters times 12 hours, 2,400 hours. This is just my rough math. Over 2,400 hours of observation and hard data being recorded on these things. Almost done with this presentation. New York Times article highlights, in 2014, F-18 pilot had a near collision with one of these objects, and an official mishap report was filed. In another case, an object flew directly between two F-18s, which were flying in loose tactical formation. That's roughly a couple hundred yards apart. The pilots got a good visual of the object, which was described as a cube. Listen to this, a cube inside a translucent sphere. That's what the object looked like to them. Okay. As a result of all the activity, and this was in the New York Times article, as a result of all this activity, the Navy decided to adopt new stance on unexplained aerial phenomena, UAPs. That's the new buzzword, guys. It's no longer a UFO, it's a UAP, and that's fine. I think that's good. I think it's a good thing. Because these things don't fly. They never did fly, right? They moved through our airspace, but there's nothing flying about these things. Yeah? So UAP is a little more apropos. The form to file such encounters remains classified. Okay, finally, this is Christopher Mellon. This is our last slide. Christopher Mellon, former deputy. Okay, here we go.
Navy pilots are claiming they've spotted UFOs nearly every day for 2 years.
Wow, look at it fly.
Wow, at first, the pilots reportedly thought these objects were a part of a top-secret drone program, but a near collision in 2014 changed their minds. Now our next guest is sounding off in a brand new series on History Channel called Unidentified Inside America's UFO Investigation. Here with more former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, Christopher Mellon. Christopher, do you believe the UFOs exist?
We know that UFOs exist. This is not no longer an issue. The Navy itself has publicly acknowledged the fact that they exist, and Navy pilots, active duty pilots, have gone on the record in the New York Times acknowledging the fact that they exist. So the issue now is, why are they here? Where are they coming from? and what is the technology behind these devices that we're observing.
Are there indications that these unidentified flying objects are doing things that this world is not capable of?
There are indications, actually. The Nimitz incident, a famous example of this, which was well documented by multiple radars, multiple pilots in broad daylight. That vehicle demonstrated speeds in excess of 5,000 miles an hour. It was able to hover 50 feet above the ocean after descending from above 80,000 feet. So the pilots who are observing these craft are absolutely mystified, and that comes through clearly in their public statements.
They are frustrated. They feel as though something should be done.
They're deeply frustrated, and that is the core of our show, Unidentified. We're giving military personnel on the front lines a voice. We're helping them get out the message, what it is they're encountering and why they're so concerned about it.
And we're not the only country who's having these encounters.
Absolutely not. And in fact, as our investigation unfolds over the first 6 episodes this season, we're going to be presenting information from a NATO ally that's been having very similar experiences.
All right, I want you brought a clip with you. I saw
Correct.
you carried the tape in with you when you in the green room. So here it is.
The object the Navy pilot is tracking suddenly seems to get bigger. The object then appears to accelerate rapidly, disappearing off screen.
That's a significant rate of acceleration in a horizontal plane off to the left. That's very fast. I have no idea what that thing is, and it's not acting like a aircraft. It's not acting like anything I've ever seen.
Yeah. So that's been the story. The New York Times writes about it. You have a strong reputation and a big title, and a huge resume. You're saying is actually happening. Has there been interaction being to being, human being to whatever these beings are?
Not that I'm aware of. These are interactions between intelligently controlled vehicles that are highly sophisticated, that are operating in and around U.S. military facilities. And hence the concern. The pilot's concern are, one, there have been near mid-air collisions. There's a safety issue. But two, there is a vital national security issue, which is that our sovereignty is being violated by vehicles of unknown origin.
What's more responsible, announcing it and saying this is our problem, this is the video, or not announcing it?
Let me mention in that regard that when Luis Elizondo, my colleague, was still in the Pentagon running the UFO investigation, I worked with him, introduced him to 2 individuals who are direct reports to General Mattis. We were unable to get that on the Secretary's agenda. Ultimately, Lou concluded, and I concluded, that the only way to make progress on this issue was from the outside, to take the information to the public and the Congress. That's what this show is about, and that's what these military pilots are helping us with.
So we're going to see it coming up Friday, May 31st at 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock Central on the History Channel. It's called Unidentified Inside America's UFO Investigation. Christopher Mellon, fascinating stuff.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Great to see you.
Greatly appreciate it.
Okay, guys, that's the last slide I have. So it's an interesting process that we're going through right now. It's going to take a while. It's not going to happen over the next year or two. It'll take several years. The issue is it takes a while to for the general public's mind to accept this sort of thing, because it's very foreign. Pardon the pun, very alien, right? It's not, the reality of these things doesn't fit into our construct. And so it takes a while for us to acclimatize and change what we deem to be reality, okay? It's going to take some time. But you'll see stories like this popping up over the several months, here and there, like every 6 months, 8 months, a year, you'll hear another story about this stuff. ATIP has been discredited lately. That's the news, that the Pentagon is denying them, that they're saying that these guys never existed, but they did. And, Christopher Mellon and Luis Elizondo were on the show Unidentified. Any of you guys catch that show? Yeah, just a few. Yeah, it was okay. It was all right. Nothing groundbreaking. So, I literally fell asleep one of the episodes, but maybe it's because I'm already familiar with all this information, right? But that's it. I want to thank you for your time and your attention.